Hey, if you're about to start your first nurse practitioner job, or maybe you're right in the thick of those first few overwhelming months, I want you to know something. You are not alone. I'm 4 months into my first nurse practitioner job, and I remember sitting there on that first day in the car about to walk in thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to screw something up here. I don't know enough to really be talking to these patients. But listen, imposter syndrome, documentation overload, the fear of prescribing the wrong medication, and then having that first real psychiatric or medical crisis that you have to manage all by yourself. That's all going to be part of the job. Today in this video, I want to talk about the 5 biggest fears that I had to face, and I think most new nurse practitioners face, and exactly how I got through them. Because if I did it, so can you. Hey, my name is Rick. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner, again, 4 months into my job. And on my channel, I talk about my experiences as a new nurse practitioner. I talk about a lot about my experience through school, which I just finished about 6-7 months ago. So if you want to check out, if you're in school and you want to check out those videos, look through the channel. You'll see a ton of videos about study tips, how I handle different things in school. And now that I'm actually practicing as a nurse practitioner, I'm trying to kind of give you insights into what I'm experiencing as a new nurse practitioner. Now, I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner, but what I want to talk about in today's video applies to any nurse practitioner specialty, because we all face the same kinds of fears when we go from being a registered nurse to being a provider, where the responsibility is much greater than it was as a registered nurse, and the consequences of what we do is much greater as well. So these are 5 fears that we all face, but I want to show you and give you an idea of how I have overcome these and what you can do as well. Now, rest assured, if this is something that you're thinking about and concerned about, I have summarized this into a cheat sheet with steps you can use to address each of these fears. If you're already a member at our study buddy level, you can get this for free. It's down. You can just go in there and download it. If you'd like to be a member, go to the link in the description, or you can go to the link in the comments, and it'll show you how to become a member, and you can access this download as well. Okay, the first one I want to talk about is imposter syndrome. Now, you may have heard about this, and I think to some degree most nurse practitioners deal with this. It feels like, oh, I'm not qualified to do this. They're going to find out. The patient's going to find out. My coworkers, my supervising physician is going to find out. I just don't know enough. And that's what imposter syndrome is. You have the title, but you don't feel like you're really that person. Let me give you a few things. I did experience this to some degree. Now, I think because I had spent so much time in my nursing career working in the emergency room, this wasn't a big issue for me, because I was used to having things that I didn't know anything about being presented almost on a daily basis. So I kind of developed a sense of how to handle that. I think there's one foundational priority that you can use for every single patient encounter, whether you feel like you know what's going on or you don't, and that is safety first. If you feel something is not safe, don't do it. Go get help. If you feel like you don't know enough to make a recommendation to the patient, go get help. I often say to my patients, my first priority here is safety. I don't want you to engage in any kind of treatment that's not going to be 100% safe for you to do. I don't have a lot of experience yet with this particular situation. I'm going to call a colleague and get some help with this. Patients appreciate that. They don't look at you like, oh my gosh, this person doesn't know anything. They know that you know enough when you need help, and that's important. The other thing that you can do if you feel this imposter syndrome is that you can remind yourself that you have completed a very rigorous training program. I mean, you have spent just 2.5 years of your life, plus clinical encounters of 600 to 1,000 hours training for this very moment. So you know way more than you probably realize that you do. Second thing is keep a wins list. And that is when you have patients who have a lot of success, write that down. When patients give you positive feedback, write that down. And when you start feeling like, man, I just don't know what I'm doing here, go back through and look at the evidence that you actually do know what you're doing. The other thing is that you find a trusted mentor or a peer with a little more experience that you can call on when you're experiencing these thoughts of self-doubt. I was very fortunate to have an outstanding preceptor who I regularly text with and meet up with, and we bounce ideas off like that. I also have a very responsive supervising psychiatrist for when I don't know things. And look at your patient load, look at your patient schedule for the day coming ahead. See what's going on in each of those patients, and if there's something that you don't feel comfortable with, do a little research in between each of those appointments, so at least you have a good overview of what you might encounter in that appointment. So the second fear that I want to talk about is the fear of making a serious mistake. And what this feels like is that what if I miss something and something that's critical, and I actually end up harming the patient? Well, let me say that depending upon your specialty, and in psychiatry, this is fairly low risk. In medical, I think it's, you have a higher potential for this. But at the same time, the probability of you actually causing serious harm to a patient is actually quite low. The way you can avoid this and reassure yourself is, number one, use evidence-based guidelines and checklists. Whenever I've got a sixth sense that, I might feel like I want to do something or prescribe a medication or do some type of treatment, and I get this sense that, I don't know if this is really going to go as well as I think, I'll get out the checklist. I'll double check the guidelines. I'll look at some of the treatment algorithms. So at least I have an evidence base to back it up. Never, ever hesitate to consult your supervising physician or colleague if you're unsure. And that's maybe the third thing, is that if you're unsure about what to do, don't just pick something and do it. The consequences are too high. You feel like, I don't know what I do. If I do this, I'm not really sure that that's the right thing. Then don't do it. Come and get back to the first thing I talked about, which is patient safety. Just don't do it and get help before you move forward. In psychiatry, there's very few things that we do that's actually going to cause physical harm to the patient. We don't prescribe any life-sustaining medications. A person misses a dose, they might have a bad day, but they're not going to, die. The real emergency kind of things, life-threatening things that we deal with in psychiatry is usually suicide, self-harm, homicidal ideation, or people who misuse the drugs that they were having. Again, that's not your fault, but those are the kind of emergencies we deal with. In medical, it's a little different. Certainly in the emergency room, when I worked in the emergency room, we were always on alert for things going south, and that's another thing. So use safety first, use your evidence-based guidelines. If you're not sure, don't do it. That's the best way to not miss something critical and end up harming someone. So the third thing I want to talk about, and maybe it's not quite a fear, but it's a very real thing that you're going to have to deal with, is being overwhelmed by documentation. And this feels like, I just can't keep up with all these notes. Will I ever finish this charting? This is real. I experienced this not when I first started, but from day to day. You'll eventually develop a rhythm about your documentation. The key thing is you can't skimp on it. The documentation is a legal document, and it's also very important, so you have a record of your decisions and treatments that you're doing with a patient. I tend to document a little more than maybe a lot of other people do. I document so that I can remember what I did and what the patient said for the next visit, because I'm not going to remember 1 month from now or 3 months from now what went on with that patient. I'm not going to remember it. I couldn't tell you what went on with all of my patients that I saw yesterday in the clinic, more or less what I did a month ago. So some of the ways that I stay on top of it is I chart during the visit whenever possible. So I'll sometimes will create quick notes in there. Now I try to avoid, for me, in psychiatry, I want to have a lot of time listening to my patient. So I try to avoid actually typing on the computer while the patient is talking, but I will tell them from time to time, I may make a note in the computer here, and that's what I'll do. I'll make a note of something that I want to come back to. Use templates for very common conditions. In psychiatry, 90% of the people I work with, patients that I have some level of anxiety, they have some level of depression. Whether they're schizophrenic, bipolar, they have a substance abuse problem, all of them almost always have that. So I have a template, I created the template of how I'm going to chart for that, and I have it in there. My mental status exam, I have a template for that. My review of systems, I have a template for that. So almost every EHR is going to have a template and a macro system that you can set up and use, so forth. Also, block, if you can, 10, 15 minutes after each appointment to finish your documentation, or a time during the day. A lot of employers will add in an admin time during the day. My company does that. I've got it, like a 30-minute window at the end of the day, which is usually all it takes for me to get it done. But use these tips to try to stay on top of it. You're not going to escape it. Documentation is the bane of every provider's existence, but it just has to be done. It's part of it, but you can streamline it and go to the people that support your EHR in your organization and ask them, I keep doing this over and over and over. How can I systematize this? How can I make this something that recurs and that loads up for my new patient? Give that a try. All right, so before we get to number 4, I'm going to have a sip of my favorite Black Rifle Coffee Company coffee. And you just can't beat that coffee. So the 4th fear that I want to talk about, and this is probably the one that created the most anxiety for me. Not an overwhelming anxiety, but this is the one that I was concerned with the most. And that is anxiety about prescribing medications. And what that feels like is I'm afraid I'm choosing the wrong medication or the wrong dose. So this is how I have processed this and worked through this. First of all, start low with a dose, again, using evidence-based guidelines, and go slow. We say that with elderly patients, but I have found that it is best with every patient, at least in my patient pool. Start with familiar medications and dosing. So you're going to see, if you're in primary care, if you're in psychiatry, you're going to see many of the same conditions over and over and over. In fact, when something wild comes in, it's almost a relief, because now you really get to think, you really get to be creative and investigate things. But you're going to see the same kind of things over and over. You're going to be prescribing the same medications over and over and over. So I think it's very tough, and I'm going to speak just about psychiatry right now. So in psychiatry, I think it's kind of hard to be prescribing something that's going to harm the patient. And I think this can be true in most nurse practitioner specialties, but I think if you are aware of allergic reactions that the patient has to medications, if you are, number 2, reviewing their vital signs to make sure there's not some unusual thing going on with blood pressure, with temperature, with weight, with heart rate, oxygenation. And number 3, if you are following your evidence-based guidelines, you're not going to have a problem prescribing. Use reliable resources too, like UpToDate or Hippocrates for double checking. There's a great app for my psychiatric nurse practitioner colleagues called the Waco Guide, wacoguide.com, which has treatment algorithms, evidence-based, and gives you medications for each of those. I refer to it constantly throughout the days. I also created a cheat sheet of common medications that I use that I have open in a tab on my browser on my computer that I can refer to all the time, and that's very helpful. Also, discuss treatment plans openly with patients, and that will help you build trust and clarity as well. I tell my patients, I mentioned this earlier, I tell my patients in prescribing something, safety is always first. So sometimes I'll be confronted with a situation where the patient has tried multiple antidepressants and has failed, or they've tried multiple types of mood stabilizers, or they have reactions to certain ones, and frankly, my familiar meds, I've run out of them, out of my list. So I'll tell patients, you know, you have a unique response profile to medications. Safety is my first priority in prescribing. Give me just a minute. I want to take a look at what's available for you and how it might best work in your situation, and look up the drugs on your computer. Patients appreciate that. They want you to be safe with them. So it's not something you have to have great anxiety over. All right, and fear number 5, the last one that I want to talk about, coffee break again. The last one that I want to talk about is handling crisis situations. Now, I've handled medical crisis situations as a registered nurse many times in the emergency room. So a crisis situation, just a crisis situation, really isn't a big deal to me. I feel confident in handling it. Not that I'm going to know everything, but that I'm not going to become panicked because I don't understand the full ramifications, or I don't understand everything. I know if I don't know something, I'm going to get somebody that does. Rarely is it only up to you to get something done. And again, when it is, you fall back to safety. The second thing is that if you're unsure of what to do, hey, we were all nurses. ABC, airway, breathing, circulation, go to that first. In psychiatry, we do have crisis situations. In the 4 months that I have been practicing, I've already had 3 crisis situations that I was the primary responsibility to handle. So, you know, this kind of feels like, well, what if somebody is suicidal, or if somebody has some type of medical emergency and I freeze? Well, you're unlikely to freeze. If you were a nurse, I can't imagine you freezing. But I want to allay your concerns. First of all, know your facility's emergency protocols. Rarely is it up to just one person in the facility to handle a crisis. Almost always it's a team event. Even in my psychiatric outpatient facility, we have a crash card and we have drills about what to do if there's a medical emergency. And we also have drills about what to do if there is a psychiatric emergency. So know that. Keep your crisis hotlines accessible. If you're not sure what to do in an emergency situation, and again, let me just talk about psychiatric emergencies, call the crisis hotline. They're there to help you. You don't have to be the patient to call that hotline. You call them, you say, hey, this is Rick, I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I have a patient in my office right now that is suicidal. I do not think they should leave the office without supervision. Can you advise me on the next steps, or can you help me find a resource to get this done? That is perfectly acceptable. And then practice some of the de-escalation phrases that you might use and steps that you might take in advance. So as I said, I've had 3 psychiatric crises and emergencies in my office in the 4 months that I've been here. 2 of them involved children, one age 11, one age 9. One was suicidal, the other one was talking to me about hearing command hallucinations, audio hallucinations that was telling them to hurt themselves. And just yesterday, I had a patient who had conversion disorder. And their presentation of conversion disorder was that they would lose consciousness 5 times from the time they went into triage for their vitals before I ever saw them. They lost consciousness. And we had to, of course, we had to manage that. And how did we manage that? Hey, it was ABC. Airway, breathing, circulation. Their vital signs were good. They had already had a neuro workup. They already had had a cardiology workup, which is why they were in my office. I diagnosed it as psychogenic, non-epileptic seizures. And we got them to a therapist because therapy is the only remedy for that. So anyway, you're going to have the crisis situation show up. Know your policies, safety first. You are a nurse. You're used to handling crisis. You're going to do it again, and you are almost never going to be alone in your facility. All right, so that's the 5 fears I think most nurse practitioners run into when getting started in their job. And I hope that this helped you in seeing how I have addressed them. Every experienced nurse practitioner stood exactly where you are today and had these same thoughts going through their mind. You just got to keep going. Your confidence is going to grow daily. Hey, sometimes I'll have a conversation with a patient and they'll walk out and I'll say to myself, I'll actually feel this like, I cannot believe I knew all the stuff that I helped them with. It's going to happen, and that's going to build your confidence as well. So as a resource for this, again, check the link in the description. I've created a cheat sheet of all these fears and how you can address them and control them and handle them. Just download that. If you want to join our community for monthly tips, every Monday you get a motivational tip. Every Wednesday you get a study tip. I have a blog post about NP school and NP career every week posted on Saturdays. Become a member and be a part of that community. And of course, like and subscribe if you think that's appropriate. Thanks for your time here. I hope this was helpful. Love to hear from you in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.